Oh my God, so professional. All of this setup is crazy. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first podcast. This is the Best Foot Forward podcast with Vicky and Ann. And if you don't already know me, my name is Vicky Vuong. I am a sneaker artist. More specifically, I paint on sneakers. And we also have Ann. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm so honored to be Vicky's co-host in this podcast. My name is Ann Duskus. I am a sneaker customizer and educator based in the Bay Area in California.
Oh my God, so professional, so proper. This is probably going to be the most proper that we ever are because we don't, what's the point of this podcast that we kind of came about the idea of making this podcast is because we now share a studio together. It's been how long? 3 months? Maybe?
Like 2.
Oh,
we
only
moved
2?
in like mid-June, right?
It feels like forever. It feels like I've
Totally
known you
feels like
forever,
forever.
right? And all we do every single day when we come into the studio is we have these chats. So the purpose of this podcast is really to capture a little bit of that. We threw around this idea of being a fly on the wall when you're in the studio with us because we talk about everything. We talk about things that we have in common, which is customizing sneakers and the whole sneaker industry, and then also all the other stuff in terms of how we want to structure our career or strategize and how we want to grow and make this a sustainable thing because now we are both full-time customizers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, Vicky and I, the way we have our studio set up is we have our table set up where we're facing each other, and we literally come into the office, and we're like, girl.
Yeah, literally like, girl.
Because
I should have started the podcast with that.
No, I love that, but it's like we see each other for like 10 hours per day. But literally, I will leave the office and I will be texting her as I'm getting in my car, leaving the office because there's something I forgot to tell her or something came to mind. And it sort of eventually became this thing where we're like, well, holy crap, like all these conversations that we're having face to face or all these phone conversations we're having. And every time we talk on the phone, it's like for hours at a time.
It really is.
And sometimes we get into these like really in-depth conversations that it's really important to us as customizers, as female customizers.
Yep.
And we wish we just have like a record button, like ready to go, like on our table so we can literally hit go anytime.
Right, exactly. Right? And when the other person's not noticing because they're talking about something that we find is so significant or would be relatable to somebody else who's doing something similar. It doesn't have to be sneakers. It could be anything. If you're pursuing art, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to, create your own business, these things may be relevant to you too. And we just find it so fascinating because before I met you, I feel like I've never had somebody who understands what I do and understands the way that I'm trying to think about my business the same way that you do, because we relate on that on so many levels, right? So
yeah, and I think that's part of why, people, so I teach master classes online currently, and the goal eventually is to be able to host in-person classes. But part of the questions I get a lot, or a question that I get a lot from people is like, well, Ann, like, why are you doing master classes? Why is it important to you? And, as someone who's taken a class where I've experienced the beauty of being in the same room with like-minded individuals and all of a sudden, like this becomes something where I didn't have anybody to talk to before.
Yep.
All of a sudden become like a really casual conversation because everybody in the room speaks the same language as me.
Exactly.
And so it's like to have Vicky, in the studio with me where I don't have to, give her context on a lot of things because she's already in the industry. She knows what I'm talking about. She knows what sneakers I'm referring to. She knows which artist I'm talking to her about.
Yeah.
And so all of that becomes so easy. And I think, part of like our conversation is like, yes, we wish we have a record button where we can just secretly start to record each other
Yeah.
because there are conversations where we're each very passionate about.
Yep.
And the beauty of those conversations is how raw they are. Like,
Exactly.
well, what do you think? Well, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Oh, they're totally raw. And there are a lot of things that we probably shouldn't put out there for our own sake, right? Like there are some things that we shouldn't be saying, but that's, again, what she said, that's the beauty of it, because in front of each other, we can just be raw and we can be honest, and our opinion and our perspectives can be unfiltered, at least in front of each other. And I think, not all of it is going to be unfiltered on this podcast, but a lot of it will be raw, will be our reactions to things. We're going to talk about things that maybe what we've been doing recently has been just trying to limit how much we just toss ourselves into conversation, because we want to leave it for this podcast. So we'll be like, hey, wait, stop the conversation there. Let's continue it when we do have the record button on, and we can share all of these things with you guys.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of what we're trying to do here too is to, again, still, trying to be professional and trying to, not have it be so refined.
Yeah.
And not have everything feel so premeditated.
Yeah.
Where we can't just, I guess, like reveal our true reaction to certain things.
Yeah.
And I think part of what we talked about is, okay, let's both come up with a list of questions, for each podcast that we record for each other, where the other person doesn't know about the question.
Exactly.
So they can't really think through
They don't have
how they
time
would answer
to
it.
process
Right.
it.
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, surprise, here's a question. What do you think? And just see what happens.
I remember you threw me under the bus when we were doing an IG Live, and you were like, Loki or Thor? I could not pick. Even after that, I think I made a choice during the live. I said Loki, but then afterwards I was like, but Thor, he's just too good to turn down, and be number 2. So yeah, we're going to be doing that a lot. And I think that's going to be the essence of this podcast. And like I said to you before, I really want this podcast to be representative of us as we transform, as we grow together, and as we progress. So whatever this episode is going to sound like, maybe down the line, episode 10 is not going to sound the same. Episode 50 is going to sound completely different, but it is documenting our journey together and us starting this podcast. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I accept that.
Yeah.
I think the expectation is to have no expectation, because we don't really know what this is going to do for our career, but we really, at least for me, I thought it was a fun idea to try, because
it's just fun. Yeah, exactly.
And then it's just again, we have an amazing tech guy. Shout out to Andy.
Yep. Shout out.
Where, we're getting a lot of help, getting this set up. But it's us learning new skills, new skill set, to kind of help us build our own business. And this is just a whole other layer of it.
Right. And I'm going to, really praise ourselves a little bit in that I pride myself a lot in being experimental, and that's everything on social media. So on Instagram, I'm always trying something new, because personally I get bored at doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the thing that I was really pleasantly surprised when I met you is that you were like, yeah, throw me into the deep end, put me in a place where I'm not comfortable, because I want to try something new. And this is exactly it. This is us putting actions to our words and making a podcast, which, like we said, we are not experts in doing this. This is the first time that we're doing anything like this, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to sort it all out together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about in our series of podcasts, in all of our episodes that's coming up, we literally, I know we talk about this in our lives, but we literally have a board of just different topic ideas. Mm-hmm. And so, I think ideally, and at least that's our goal, we're going to try to, be really defined in each episode of the topic that we want to talk about. But at the same time, it's, again, Vicky and I were sneaker customizers. So by default, everything we talk about is going to be related in relation to what we do.
Right.
But, I guess I don't want it to, like you mentioned earlier, I don't want it to be a podcast where somebody come, only because it's sneaker related.
Right.
It's about how do we build our business? How do we brand our business?
Yeah.
And that's all in addition to what we do physically with our hands on a day-to-day basis.
How did two girls in the San Francisco Bay Area decide that they want to start a studio together, they want to start a business on their own? And that's exactly it. What you mentioned, all of our topics, they're now, I touched the mic. They're on our door. We have Post-it notes, like very much like a tech startup here. Like we take inspiration from different aspects of our life. And I think I would say that we're quite unique in the sneaker industry or the customizing world right now because we are two girls doing completely different things almost to sneakers, but so many similarities, so many differences in the same industry. And there aren't that many people that are exactly like us. And we've got a dynamic, I think, that, I really love personally. So I think it's going to be fun to share that with people. That's the point of this podcast.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, again, how often do we get to find somebody who does the same thing that we do? I mean, we're sneaker customizers, but like our approach are totally different.
Yeah.
And to be able to have somebody like that to share it with versus like, okay, I'm on an island, I'm by myself, like, what do I need to do by myself?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And so it's like so nice to have that additional energy to like bounce ideas off of, and like just kind of like hash things out.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like we do things very differently. Our approach to solving problems is very different. So it's like if I'm thinking of something, I'm like, Ann, what do you think? She'll give me a solution that I haven't thought about, and that's completely coming from a different perspective. So we always just bounce ideas back and forth. We run things by each other. It's great.
I mean, for better or for worse, honestly, literally the other day, Vicky and I were hanging out in the studio and we were talking about, there's an idea that came to mind. We're like, oh my gosh, Ann, we have to try, right?
Yeah.
That's what like Vicky was saying to me. And then, so we started kind of going down the path of exploring this idea, just like as we're working with our hands, we're just talking to each other, spitballing. And then, and I remember like at some point, like I walked out of the studio because I had to go to use the restroom. And then while I was in the restroom, I was doing some self-reflecting and I was like, oh, Ann, like, you didn't have to say it that way. Or like, you're really sassy pants over there. Like,
I didn't even notice. I didn't even know what you were talking about. I was like, what? I mean, yeah, I'm so insensitive to these things. I think that I'm like, what do you mean? You were great. You were amazing. Like, you're just saying what you think.
But then like, it's just interesting, right? Because then like, I did a little self-reflecting. Like while I was in the restroom, I came back, I was like, Vicky, yo, like, I'm so sorry about what I said, you know? Yeah, girl. Like, you know, because it's like, you know, sometimes like you catch yourself, you know, saying something that you're not sure if you came out the way that you intended it to be. And then for me, it's like, I always feel like it's better to err on the safer side, to just kind of be like, hey, Vicky, like, I'm not sure if like, you know, I said something like that might have offended you. But of course, like she was super sweet. She's like, no, you were fine. But then, you know, it's like, I feel like that's been our dynamic since the beginning. So like Vicky and I, you know, we met online, I think like back in December of 2020.
Yeah.
And we got to meet in person for the first time in January of 2021.
Yep.
And so my perspective of our relationship is like, you know, it has always based on like admiration, and like being really vulnerable with each other. Like right off the bat, it was really strange. It's like when we saw each other, we're like, oh, Asian girl.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just like that familiarity right away, like, which is like very trust building, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then, and like honesty, you know, and I think it was sort of the expectation we set right off the bat, which I really feel like I adore and I feel really blessed about because, and I think that's where like my self-reflecting in the bathroom came from, because I was like, oh, were you being a little too straightforward? Were you too honest? You know, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I feel like I agree. When we first met each other, I just opened up to you and I was like, here, these are some of the difficulties that I've been facing. And then also just as we were talking about getting a studio together, I realized that I didn't want to lead you on in the wrong way. And I was pretty honest with you in terms of, you know, where we were with finances, where we were with like how much engagement and how much of this, like we wanted it to be 50-50 and I wanted it to be like that. I remember we had this conversation which I don't know if this is going to be kept in here or not, but it was literally like, hey, Vicky, if money is an issue, what if we did something like 60-40 or we did something like that? And I was like, no. Like, I want this. If we're in it together, and we are both going to play equal part, whatever that means, in this relationship, in this friendship, right? And so I think right off the bat, I was ready to be like, we need to be completely transparent. We need to be honest with each other. And that's so that we can maintain the best friendship and also kind of like professional relationship while working in the same space, right? Because this is all a lot of fun, but we have that respect for each other. And we're not going to overstep boundaries or like be careful, and also it's getting to know each other, because I feel like I know a lot about you, but it has only been 8 months that we've really met each other, which is crazy.
I mean, we met in December. I mean, we met in person for the first time in January 2021,
Right.
but I mean, we didn't really start spending a lot of time together until we moved into the studio together. So really, like, it's over the last 2 months where we've actually really, like, have gotten to know each other more and more.
Yeah, and you can be best friends with someone, but you can't necessarily live with someone and move in with them, right? So I feel like having the studio together and seeing each other so often every single week is like, it's a big commitment. So without all of that transparency, without the honesty and just rawness in our relationship, I don't think we could do this long term. So yeah,
I know.
We're on the right track, girl.
I know. I mean, it's crazy because it's like, I mean, I kind of treat Vicky like she's my sis, she's my sister. And part of that comes with the territory. It's like, okay, like, yes, I'm going to be vulnerable with you. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, people are always like, oh, people, I don't know why people have this impression, but people are like, oh, you and Vicky are now business partners.
Yeah.
We're not officially.
Yeah.
But we are for fun, I guess, with some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
It just kind of makes sense how we link up. Like, I can sort of see that, you know, but then like we never went into this as like, oh, we're going to share a studio and we're going to start a business together.
The idea is not combining the two businesses together. We are still separate businesses just running out of the same studio kind of thing. But also, this is the first time ever where I've been able to pitch an idea and I haven't had to convince somebody super, super hard about why it's a good idea, right? Because we know what we're capable of. We know what industry we currently are in, and the idea then just can move to the next level. Whereas before, I remember, a lot of people are like, oh, you've got all these get rich fast ideas, right? What's your new one? What is it this time? And having to convince people around me that this is a good idea. And then eventually I get discouraged and I don't do it. Whereas with you, it's like, hey, can we just sit down and do a mock-up? Like it already goes to the next step before having to sit down and be like, Ann, this is a really good idea. This is why, You already understand, where I'm coming from at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's because we share the same struggles.
Yeah.
I just, whether or not it's like, our cultural background or just the people that we're surrounded by, we share the same struggles, so we have the understanding. And I think, again, like going back to what you were saying earlier, I think the beauty of our relationship is like we both have that sort of entrepreneurial attitude where we feel like, well, like, what's the hurt in trying? Let's just try, see what happens.
Exactly.
Like, the worst that can happen is, like, it doesn't work out. Okay, we'll move on to the next thing.
Yep, exactly. And that's the thing with it is somehow coincidentally we were both in the same time in our careers where we decided that we were going to give this sneaker customizing world a try. Like, we don't want to regret how much we haven't given our all to it, because a lot of times these things, our entrepreneurial pursuits have always been a side hustle. This is the first time, I would say, am I right, for both of us, that we're doing this full time, we're giving it our all. So we're out here trying new things, trying everything to see what sticks, what works, and then getting rid of things that obviously aren't really effective in building our business and moving forward. So there's a lot of trial and error. We're not sitting here saying like, we are so successful in what we do, you should, respect us for everything we do. It's more just like, hey, this is our start, this is our beginning, but join us on our ride and see where we take this. Right.
Yep. And I love sharing my failures, with people, because I feel like your successes are great, but in a weird way, it's almost less relatable than your failures to most people, right? Because I feel like most people, especially like in what I do, like so many people are so afraid to try because they're crippled by the possibility of failing.
Yep.
And I think, we have to throw this up. Like, do we have
That's
this
literally
topic?
one of the topics I was going to say.
Yeah, I see it on our board. Like, one of our topic that we want to talk about in our future episode is failure, because I feel like, together as, teammates, like we both had our shares of failures, whether or not it's like what we're doing currently, but like everything that led up to what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Just the other day, like I was telling Vicky, I've tried and start like a few businesses, that didn't work out, but that's okay. And I can't wait to get more into that, deeper into that, so you guys can kind of get to know like where I've been and, how I got
Ann has so much experience in,
I wouldn't say that.
I mean, let me just say this and establish the fact that Ann went through, art school, and she is true a designer. She has so much experience in the industry as well before she's even coming into this. So she has like her fair share of a full career before launching into this career currently, right? And that's like very different for me, because I came from a completely different field as well. So there's so much that Ann knows and her expertise that she uses in her work today. We definitely have to dive deeper into that. And there's also that question with failures, like, would you ever do that again? If you had a choice to go back and correct something that you might have done 10 years ago, would you not go through that? Because I feel like all of it takes you to where you are today, what we are doing today is because we failed at doing what we were trying to do in the past. Because otherwise we could probably be like, you would have maybe an apparel company that you're running and you're super successful doing that. You wouldn't even have touch shoes, right?
Yep. Totally. And to your point earlier, like about just how our backgrounds are so like pretty much like on opposite like side of the spectrum.
It's crazy.
Right? Like I went to art school, like Vicky didn't go to art school, and I love that. And I love that because I feel like I have a lot of people that come to me and who are very similar in my upbringing, in the sense that like I've always been a creative person and I've never been academically driven. But it's like there are a lot of people who are like, well, I finished high school and I, like I'm not ready to, go get my higher education right now. Like, what do you think about me just starting a career, like doing design?
We get that question so often.
Right, you do too. Yeah. And it's like, so, but then I also have people, who went to school for so many years and has like a, BA in design or industrial design, fashion design, whatever it is, but then that might not end up doing design.
Yep.
And so it's like, I love like one of us like went to design school, one of us didn't go to design school, but like look at the path we're on today. Like
and
we share the same path.
what's kind of crazy is like, so I come from a science background. Everything is measured. Everything is so exact. The type of art that I do today is more like I'm leaning towards doing things that are freehand, abstract, less calculated. Whereas I feel like for your method, you say like, you're maybe that is part of art school that I don't understand, or that I didn't know about previously. But like everything that you do is so much more precise, and like the way that you go about solving problems is very methodical and very like very well calculated out, and you kind of like that's how you figure out how to make a certain design or like change up a certain design. You're very you're very scientific about it, I guess.
Yeah, it's so strange.
Strange.
Thank you for making that observation. It's so interesting because like in my mind I'm like, okay, so I was recently talking to a client about doing like a really fun project, but then I found myself in conversation, with this client, talking about this project in the sense where like, from a very more business oriented idea, which is not a bad thing because again, traditionally I'm trained as a professional designer. Like I get paid for designing product with a target margin,
right?
And so, like I've never worked for a company where like, oh, Ann, like no budget, you get to design whatever you want. And like, that's like a cushy gig. That is an easy gig.
Yep.
Like the harder gig is to design a mass appeal product that fits within a budget that can be mass produced. And so, but so much of what I do today, it's like I in the end, the product itself, like I kind of like have a lot of room to play with.
Right.
But then in terms of like the process of getting there, yes, like I think you're totally right in observing that like I'm very methodical about it. And I think that's just sort of the nature with shoemaking, right? Because like there's a lot of like financial commitment upfront, you know, to like get into shoemaking, right?
Course.
Like forget about the machines that are like a couple $1,000s, but that's just one machine. But like anytime you think about like using even just cow hides, right? Like forget about the exotic hides like snake or croc or, you know, stuff like that. If you just think about cow hides, you know, depending on like how much you get, like you couldn't even just get, like there are some companies out there where you can just get a panel,
right?
You know, like an 8x10 or 11x14, whatever it is. But most of the time, you know, you're buying leather hides, like whether or not it's a side or it's a bend, you know, that's at least like 10 to 12 square feet. And they can range anywhere from like $100 to $300, right? And that's just one hide. And sometimes like if you want to do color blocking, you want to have at least 2 to 3 different colors on a hide. So like up front, you're spending close to $1,000 just on materials alone. Right. So forget about all the donors. So I think.
Don't like, even get me started about harvesting donors. Okay.
That's a future
That's
episode.
like literally another episode's topic on its own. But yeah, harvesting souls means, you know, like buying shoes and then taking their souls as donors to make new shoes out of it. Right. So like that's another, on top of that, there's that. So.
Right.
I mean,
so like what I do, like, by nature, I just have to be more methodical about it because I don't have unlimited budget, you know? And so like, I almost can't F up like on like, so I have to be super calculated in that regard. It's like, okay, this is going to be my design and like, I'm going to stick to this. And like, that's just what I have to work with, you know?
And I'm trying to figure out whether that's the reason why there aren't a lot of female sneaker customizers that do what you do. Right? Because we can count on one hand, right, how many girls there are that are doing, like females that are doing exactly what you do. And even within the whole industry, the number of people in total, there aren't as many as there would be in the sneaker painting industry because, you know, the barrier of entry is a lot lower where all you have to do is kind of buy a pair of shoes and then buy your paint brushes, and then you're ready to go. And you can kind of start small. Whereas for you guys, I feel like you do have to commit to getting a machine, access to machines, materials, all of that stuff. And then how many clients are able to even pay you for that, right? So like something that we talk about a lot is like, the clientele that you have, or that actually sneaker artists, like sneaker customizers like what you guys do, tend to make shoes for yourself, right? A lot. Whereas sneaker painters, on the other hand, I find are people who are doing commissions all the time. They start off doing commissions and they get lost. And I'm still getting lost in doing that, as you get enticed by somebody telling you, hey, I'm going to pay you this much to do a pair of shoes, this design. And then you get more and more and more. And I never really have a chance to make sneakers for myself. Like I barely have any pairs. You have, how many are sitting there? At least 10, right, on the shelf that are all just in your size, ready to wear for you. And you've been able to do that because of the nature of what you do.
Wait, Vicky, okay, walk me through this though. Like, are you kind of like just that one person, like one sneaker painter, customizer that doesn't have shoes, like, you know, just sitting on your shelf? Or is it you're kind of the exception? Like,
no, I can't say that. I can't speak for everyone, obviously. But I feel like with the way things go, and I see this a lot, is over Christmas, we all just become elves, right? Where we're creating things for everyone else. And if it's not creating sneakers for a client, it's creating sneakers for a family member. Because it's so easy to do. It's like, hey, if I buy you a pair of Vans, will you paint something on it for me? You know, and that's how I got started. Doing this for 9 years, so many times it's like friends or family coming to me and saying like, oh, like I have this design that I really want you to do. Could you please do this for me? And whenever I do have that time, maybe it's just me not knowing how to prioritize myself, but I'll be like, okay, I'll do it, you know, and then I'll spend more than what I anticipated. I always budget like 10 hours and then I end up spending the entire week trying to make this piece as intricate as I possibly can. And, you know, then I end up not having any shoes to wear. And Andy, who is my partner, he is my he's like
a wear tester,
yeah, right, for all the shoes. So he actually gets all of the sneakers. If it's a new paint that I'm testing out, a new silhouette, a new material that I'm painting on, he gets it first. He wears it into the ground. He's not somebody who is very precious about their sneaker customs. Usually if you pay hundreds, thousands of dollars for a pair of customs, you don't trash them, but his job is literally to trash them. So there you go. Then there's another pair that goes out into the world and doesn't really stay in pristine condition. So whenever you're asking me like, oh, could you show me some of your pairs? Like either they've been shipped out or they're super dirty and super dusty and like all creased up because I need to see how the paint wears. Right?
Yeah.
So,
but that's what I love about you though. I think like, again, I don't know many sneaker painting customizers as, like the kind of relationship that we have, I don't have it with anybody else.
Yeah.
And not to say like a sneaker customizer, well, sneaker painter.
Mm-hmm.
But she's the only person I know that really wear tests her products, which I think is so valuable and not done enough in my industry. Like guilty, like I'm totally guilty of not wear testing my products enough. One, because a lot of my shoes are concept shoes. And two, because, and again, like this is not discounting how much time it takes for you to paint an entire like pair of shoes, because I've seen you work like 60, 70, 80 hours on one pair of shoes. And so, but like, again, similarly to like what I do from shoemaking, it's like, yes, like anytime I work on a concept, I don't just go like directly to like, making like, oh, here, I'm just going to pull this out of my butt, like
Exactly.
I got this, I have to make prototypes and I have to adjust the prototypes for me to even get to the final shoe.
Yep.
And then by the time you get to the final shoe, like unless it's for the client, if it's for myself, like I'm not worried about wear testing it because I'm super precious with them, you know? And so like, I only wear them on special occasions or, I'll like, again, I'm very careful with them. Most of the time I just like store them in a box and then I'll just display them,
Yeah. And two things to that is one, I wear test them because in the past I've had a lot of clients, and in the past there have been shoes that come back that's like, oh no, this has creased. And that was, one time I remember is right at the beginning, I was just using store-bought, probably like paints from Michael's kind of thing, and I painted on a pair of shoes, sent them out, and they got sent back right away because after one or two wears, they would just crack, right? And I think it is very important for a customizer to understand that if it fails, how do you fix it? Or if it fails, you should get that feedback always from your customers, because they want you to know that doesn't work and you need to try something else. And then also, I forget what I was trying to say to you is, I feel like also being in the same studio, we get to see how each other work. And you see me painting shoes for 80 hours, and then I see you, doing sketches and like mocking things up for a full week or 2 weeks. And it's like, okay, who are you kidding? This process takes a really long time. This is why we charge as much money as we do. And whatever we're quoting for, Ann says this famously, so I'm going to get you to say it, but like whatever we're quoting for, you're getting a bargain for it, right?
Yeah. Like our clients are actually, I know this sounds so like Vicky, so arrogant to say, and like I'm cringing, like even just saying it out loud, even though I truly believe it and I'm very passionate about this. And I feel like the entire industry needs to all come up to this level.
Right.
Because just the nature of what we do requires so much detail and attention and love and blood and sweat, and so like I feel like most of the time, almost all the time, our clients are actually getting a discount because again, like all the behind the scenes and the back end hours that people don't get to see, where they only get to see the final beautiful product, are all like the work that we have to put in ahead of time before we can even get to making and building a final product.
Exactly. And I think this is one of my goals throughout my career, my business, and then also through this podcast, is being able to dissect just how much time we spend creating this product in the end that we call, our custom. And custom is, I want it to be viewed more what we do as like a luxury item, because if you take into account how much time it actually takes to produce the product, the time that we don't charge for a lot of times is preparing, doing the research, doing the mock-ups. If that can take 1 to 2 weeks to do, imagine paying somebody minimum wage even for a full week of work, full 2 weeks of work, and then adding that on top of whether it's sneaker painting or creating the shoes from scratch, how much would that cost? And you cannot in any world go around and have somebody not get paid for 2 weeks of just sitting there and thinking and designing and doing all of the background work that it takes to create a truly exclusive one-of-one custom for you. It's not going to be $500 even. $500 might sound like a lot for a pair of shoes. That is nothing even close to how much we charge and how much we should be charging for the amount of work that we do. And the expertise that you have, especially with Ann, like I said, your background is so rich that you don't charge for the work that's being done, but the experience that you have for the person who's making the item that you want to buy. Right. So
no, I completely agree with that. And it's like, and same thing goes for you. It's like, if you were to charge $1,500 for a pair of your customs versus somebody else's $1,500 customs, I trust, based on what I'm seeing and what I know about you, that yours will outlast wear-wise than your competition.
Thank you.
Only because, yes, I've seen you wear test them, and I've seen, again, they're buying a piece and they're paying for your experience. Like you have tried different brands of paints and finishers, and you know how to prepare them prior to painting in order for the top coat to have a long-lasting like wear, you know? And so again, that's the price that you're paying.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think these are obviously topics that we have on our Post-it note board, and we're going to dive into that a lot deeper. Pricing is a thing that I think a lot of people want to know about. We want to be very transparent about that, right? Whenever we get to that episode, whenever we get to it, we're going to disclose, how we price, right? What we've done in the past, what we actually price, not just like what we're quoting and saying like, oh, I charge this much, but like how much have you actually charged in the past and all of that stuff. And I can't wait to get down to all of that with you. Yeah.
And I feel like I'm one of those people who are like, if you need me to itemize why I'm charging you so much, I am 100% capable of doing that. And I can show you exactly why you're being charged and where you're actually getting a huge discount of my time.
Yes.
But I mean, all that said though, like I literally the other day, like, so Vicky knows, like I've been working on sketches for a client, and this is for an original shoe.
Yeah.
And
they're epic, by the way. Just the sketches.
So nice.
I've not even seen the shoes, but they're epic, the sketches.
She is very confident in my ability to execute them. Regardless of that, though, it's like I honestly, like without any of you, and like we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And so because like I'm sitting here, I'm sketching and different designs, and there was just like very clear moment to me while I was sketching, and I just had a moment of like just feeling so grateful because I just remember the last time I sketched like this was when I was working full-time as a professional designer, and I just remember that experience being like so stressful while rewarding. It was so stressful, because we had such a short period of time to design an entire season of products. And the SKU count and just like volume wise, it was just like so ridiculous that in comparison to what I get to do now, I was just like having so much fun sketching. I was inspired. I think I remember telling you, I was like, oh, I'm going to present like 3 different options. And I ended up sketching like 9 different options because I was just like, oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do that. Yeah. And so like, we always talk about like, how time is so significant in what we do, because in order for the both of us to produce good work, the only way we are able to do that is to have the time to do that. And so like us being able to do it on our terms has been such a huge like advantage, right? Because we get to dictate like, okay, how much time do I need for this? And in order for me to present, like to put our best foot forward, bring it back to our podcast name, but that's just the thing, It's like, yes, like thank you so much for supporting me and let me repay you by giving you good work sort of thing.
Good work, exactly. And that's exactly it. I feel like we should probably go, come full circle at the end of this episode and just talk about our name a little bit. Best Foot Forward. It also stands for BFF. If you haven't figured that out, it is so corny, but like so perfect, and I love it at the same time. And it's about putting your best foot forward, and the work that we do, because now we're not being supervised by somebody else. We are the ones that are kind of dictating what gets put out, what represents us, what is our brand right now. We want to do the best work that we possibly can so that, people recognize us for doing best work, the really good work, right? Not even just because we are girls that, people have their eyes on us or anything like that. It's because our work stands out and speaks for itself. So, we are trying so many things, and we're really blessed to be surrounded by creators in this space that we currently are that are doing something very similar, where it's like they do luxury customized items. The price tag on it makes sense, but it's also very huge, right? Very talented people, very talented artists, and we've got furniture makers, we've got jewelry makers, and while we are putting our best foot forward and we are putting all of this extra time into doing our work, we're also trying to figure out how we can get paid for this and make this sustainable. So all of these things kind of weave into each other in, how we build up our business. And I think that that's exactly what this podcast is about, right?
Just doing our best.
Yeah, just doing our best.
Happens. The rest will come.
Yeah, exactly. And we're so confident about that. That's sort of what is holding us together, is if we put out something that the world has never seen, if we put out something that is done better than other people, that we are naturally going to get the reward that we deserve from the hard work and from determination to put out best work.
Yeah. And I mean, even like, to me, it's even like beyond that. It's like, okay, like we think is the best, but it's like, again, that's just us doing our best work.
Right.
And it's subjective whether or not is the best, but we are doing our best.
Right.
And I think that's important to us because, you and I just sort of have that like high integrity of, again, pushing ourselves to do the best work that we can.
And we are the type of people that don't like to repeat projects because it always has to be a little bit different. It has to be a little bit more challenging, and we have to be able to make some kind of breakthrough with the next project that we do. So Best Foot Forward is not so much like we are the best sneaker customizers in the world. That is not at all what we're saying, but what we're saying is we're going to put our best work, our personal best work forward, and that is the competition. It's not between customizers, it's just with yourself and trying to get better with every single shoe that you're making, putting out there. Yeah. So cool. I mean, that sounds good for a first episode. This is going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy, and I hope people having a good idea on like what more we're going to be diving into.
We have so much to
we
unpack.
already sort of made some checklist of okay, let's talk about pricing, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. But we're just, and again, every day we're adding new topics on our board because we're just so inspired and we're just so passionate about so many different things. So I can't wait.
And it's just fun. We have so many stories.
So fun.
Things that we come in, we're like, girl, this is what happened last night, or this is what happened. Like, we have so many stories to share with you guys, and then just, get this off of our chest because I think it's interesting. I think this could be.
I mean, it's interesting to me.
It is. I know, but then again,
to somebody else, fine. I'm just gonna listen to the same recording over and over again until I get my viewership up, and then we'll see what happens.
We have to talk about that too later on. Is if you don't like your own stuff, then how do you expect other people to like your stuff, kind of thing. But anyways, there's so much to talk about, and that's what it is. We just decide that between the two of us, this would be really interesting to share with you guys, and that's why we put together this podcast.
So much to talk about, and until I get used to my own voice.
Oh, God.
It's like I'm just waiting for the episode where it clicks, and I'm no longer annoyed by my own voice.
You're going to not
in
notice.
My head.
You're not going to notice that. It's going to be so far in advance, you're going to look back. That's when you'll figure out that, I've forgotten that I was worried about my voice this entire time.
Thanks, Vicky.
Yeah.
See, I'm telling you, she just gasses me up.
No. Yeah, I mean, this is from experience. It took me 9 hours to film 20 seconds for my first YouTube video.
Oh my God. Girl.
Yeah.
Girl.
So I am not at all comfortable with being in front of a camera, listening to my own voice. All of this stuff is awkward as heck.
But we're going to go over it with your help. Thank you guys so much.
Yes. And we're going to ask
listening.
for questions soon. So
Yeah.
there will be a segment where you guys can write to us, let us know what you want us to talk about, things that you want to know more about between the two of us. And yeah, so until next time, that's episode 1.
Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Sweet.
Oh my God,
What do you
that's
think?
amazing.
What do you think?
That was fun.
Yeah.